Hi, I'm John Green. Welcome to my salon. This is Mental Floss Video, and did you know that George Washington had a library book that was 221 years overdue? In 1789, Washington borrowed The Law of Nations from the New York Society Library. In 2010, the Mount Vernon staff sent a replacement book back, which would have meant a $300,000 late fee, but luckily it was waived. Anyway, that's the first of many facts about libraries I'm going to share with you today, because I love libraries. In fact, you may not know this, but for 6 years I worked for the American Library Association. There's a bonus fact. It's thought that the first ever public library was run by a Greek man named Clearchus, a student of Plato. He died in 353 BCE. A more famous ancient library is the Library of Alexandria. It's said that every person who arrived in Egypt had to surrender their books. They would then be copied, and the original was placed in the library. The copy was returned to the owner. That seems kind of like the opposite of the contemporary library experience, but whatever, Alexandria. As for the oldest still working library in the world, it's in Morocco. It was founded by a woman named Fatima al-Fihri in 859 CE. It contains some very old and very valuable Islamic manuscripts. In fact, at one point, the door to the manuscript room had 4 different locks, which 4 different people had the keys to, and you would need all of them there to get into the room. Yeah, we keep 4 separate keys to the piggy bank to prevent us from premature pork chop partying. Another library with important religious texts is the National Library of Bhutan. It was consecrated, so technically it's a Buddhist temple, and that distinction allows them to maintain one of the largest collections of Buddhist texts in the world. The biggest library in the world by items is the Library of Congress here in the United States, with 162 million items. In second place is the British Library, with over 150 million. But speaking of the Library of Congress, they have a secret FBI interrogation manual in their collection. The incident was a bizarre mistake made by an agent who attempted to copyright the 70-page manual in 2010, but by doing that, the person made it so that any member of the public can read the sensitive material. The Library of Congress also has a Twitter archive. They announced in 2010 that they were going to archive every public tweet ever. But since that announcement, little has been done on the project because it's difficult dealing with that much raw data, and also because, there isn't widespread agreement at the moment that we actually want every public tweet archived forever. But it is encouraging to think that people of the future might know about Covfefe. The Kansas City Library is famous for its community bookshelf, the wall of huge book spines that lines the parking garage. They're real titles, all suggested by the community. Another famous library in the United States is the New York Public Library, which has 2 lion statues out front. They've been called a few things over the years. First, they were named after the library's founders, so they were Leo Astor and Leo Lennox. Eventually, they became Lord Lennox and Lady Astor, weird name for a male lion, and now their names are Patience and Fortitude. Part of the collection at the New York Public Library is a recipe for beer written by George Washington, and in 2011, the organization teamed up with Coney Island Brewing Company, a subsidiary of Schmaltz, to produce 25 gallons of Fortitude Founding Father brew. Turns out George Washington, good general, great president, not a great brewer. Back in the early 20th century, when the New York Public Library system was being established, people lived in the various libraries because they had to shovel coal into the furnaces at all hours of the night, and there are still 13 of these apartments of the original 30. Scientists have been trying to figure out how grimy library books are since at least 1911. One study in 2013 found traces of cocaine and herpes in library books from Belgium's Antwerp Public Library. Oh, Antwerp. But that's an extreme example, plus they were in very minuscule amounts. Experts agree that it is unlikely for a person to get sick from a library book. In the year 2000 in Denmark, a youth organization started an interesting project, a human library. Basically, people would go and interact with different types of people, everyone from an Olympic athlete to a questioning Christian, and you'd pick one out, like a book, then sit down with them and hear their story. Another unique type of library, tool libraries. Members pay a monthly fee, and then they can check out household tools that they need but don't own. But back to book libraries, as of 2013, 61% of American adults had a library card, and 90% of Americans agreed that if their public library were to close, it would impact their community. The last heir to the Ottoman Empire was a man named Osman Bayezid Effendi, and he was fluent in 6 languages, which made him perfect for his job at the Library of Foreign Languages in New York. In fact, he worked there for 34 years. Another famous librarian, Beverly Cleary, who wrote the Ramona Quimby book series. Before World War II, she was a children's librarian, and she later recalled that kids would ask for books containing characters who were like them, but, quote, there weren't any at that time. So she changed that. The tradition of presidential libraries in the United States was not started by a president. Rutherford B. Hayes' son, Colonel Webb C. Hayes, came up with the idea. In 1912, almost 2 decades after his father had died, Webb donated a lot of their property and historical belongings to the state of Ohio. One thing he asked for in exchange? A library dedicated to his father. In 1938, FDR announced that he would do something similar, and presidential libraries have been a thing ever since. Today, there are 13 presidential libraries run by the National Archives. Texas has the most of any state, with 3, the libraries and museums of Lyndon B. Johnson, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush. It's said that the movie adaptation of the book The Outsiders got made partially because of a school librarian's petition. In 1980, Joellen Misakian sent Francis Ford Coppola a letter asking if he would adapt the novel by S.E. Hinton. She included the signatures of 110 students and a copy of the book. Producer Fred Roos responded that one of the company's readers agreed, so they were considering an adaptation, although he would tell the New York Times that he eventually read it himself. Of course, it did eventually get made, and was a pretty good movie, although not as good as the book. The author and editor Isaac Asimov worked on around 500 books during his lifetime, and because of that, his work fit into 9 out of the 10 major Dewey Decimal classes, which you can see here, and also, he did write a foreword to a book that fit into the 10th. Melville Dewey, by the way, invented the system when he was a 21-year-old student assistant in the Amherst College Library. It was first published in 1876. And in 2007, a library from Arizona made waves when it announced that the Dewey Decimal System would no longer be used to organize the collection. 95% of public libraries in the US still use it. And finally, I returned to my salon to tell you about library vending machines. These are more common in China. The first one in the United States opened in Norman, Oklahoma in 2013, and the one there is open 24/7, and it dispenses 400 items, including books, DVDs, and audiobooks. God, I love libraries. Thanks for watching Mental Floss video, which is made with the help of all of these nice people, and thanks to all the librarians out there. You are doing such important work. In the comments, please let me know what your favorite book is if you have one, and as we say in my hometown, don't forget to be awesome.